Hello and welcome back to Inside Pack Sports. Today we're going back into our Beyond the Boards features. This time going back a little further in the time machine, going back to the '07 football recruiting class. We're going to talk about the story of how NC State was able to land Russell Wilson, some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes, and the impressions on the NC State staff. Joined today, as always, by James Henderson. James, I know you're excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, Russell is one of my favorite players, man. Obviously, went on to do great things at NC State, at Wisconsin, which we can talk about on a later one of these, I'm sure. But also NFL wise, Super Bowl champion. I think he's a Hall of Famer, still throwing it right now. All those things, and yeah, I mean, just from a recruiting standpoint, we can jump right into it. That 2007 recruiting class, and the way recruiting on the football side works is you're typically recruiting a year ahead, right? So for the 2007 class back then, a lot different than now. You were using the '06 spring and summer to recruit players at your camps and do all those different things to have guys committed going into the fall of 2020 of 2006. So he would technically sign in 2007 and enroll as a freshman in 2007, but State was recruiting him back in the summer of 2006. And I can still remember it when he camped at NC State, the buzz he created at that point. NC State had Kurt Signetti on staff as the recruiting coordinator, who's now obviously well known at Indiana as the head coach. And from what I recall, Russell blew away NC State's coaching staff, Chuck Amato, Kirk Signetti, all those guys. They instantly offered him while he was at camp. And he was not a big time recruit. I mean, this is a guy who I think at the time maybe had an offer from Richmond. I mean, he was from Richmond, Virginia. The problem with Russ was he was a baseball guy too, but he was 5'10", 5'11", not your prototypical quarterback size. So he did not have a lot of offers. I mean, it was essentially, I think at that time, Richmond. I think Duke eventually would offer him, but there were small schools on Russell Wilson at the time as he was going out and really trying to camp and earn offers. Like I said, he went to NC State, blew their coaching staff away with his arm talent, his size, not his size, his athleticism, all those different things he could do. And so State really was pushing to try and get him. But the thing that was interesting, Jake, was he also had camped in North Carolina, was camping at North Carolina, and had camped in North Carolina, and they were going to be a thorn in NC State's side. The funny thing about it, Kurt Signetti was at NC State. I believe at the time his brother Frank Signetti was the offensive coordinator at North Carolina, and so you had UNC, who again I think UNC probably for a kid from Richmond, Virginia, without a lot of ties to NC State, and was going to a private school, collegiate school in Richmond. Maybe Russell appealed a little. Maybe North Carolina appealed a little more to Russell than NC State did. But UNC had him at camp, and from what I had heard at the time, they a lot like Kurt, Frank loved him. But the problem for UNC is they had a commitment already from Mike Paulus, who the was considered a top quarterback in that recruiting class. I think for them, he was considered like the ringleader of their recruiting class. So I don't think UNC wanted to ruffle any feathers with Paulus and that recruiting class. So they chose to not offer Russell. And yeah, left the door open for him for NC State to seal the deal, which they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about it. I mean, I was looking it up. He was a two-star recruit, and you
Yeah.
look back at some of these recruiting battles, and we talk about it in modern and tying it into modern day recruiting. It's looking at that offer list more than the stars sometimes. And when guys start going through the process and other programs start being interested, uh, that's kind of more of a basis on talent sometimes than the actual offer list itself.
Well, I think that's the thing is why I say a lot of times now you don't have to. It's not about your ranking. You've got to be able to properly evaluate players. And I think NC State said, you know what? We don't care how many stars this guy has. We think he's the goods. We think he can play. And I mean, if you watched him play, and that's the thing is he ended up committing to NC State, and again was a two-star recruit. A lot with the North Carolina thing, like there were buzz about it. I think UNC had tinkered or thought about maybe offering him at a different position, chose not to do so. But if you're NC State, once you got him committed, that was the same year in 2006. I went that fall. I think NC State was playing at Virginia that year, and I went up a day early, went to Richmond on Friday and watched him play a high school game, and before staying overnight and going to Charlottesville for the state Virginia game, and was blown away by him. It was my first time watching him in person. Obviously play a game. I did the same thing with Mike Glennon, I believe, a year later. And the thing with Russ was it was just he was a man amongst boys. He could do whatever he wanted. He could throw the ball however he wanted. He could run. It wasn't fair. Now again, he was at collegiate school playing. I think it was independent 1A competition in Virginia, but you could tell this guy was just a different level player. And so I remember leaving that game just totally convinced in how talented he was and how good he was. And I didn't care about his recruiting ranking. I remember I was just sold on him as a player. And for NC State, I know that coaching staff was sold as well. The problem, Jake, well, that season didn't go too well for NC State. And NC State had a losing streak, and that was the same year that Chuck Amato was fired as head coach at NC State, which left that recruiting class in a little bit of turmoil.
Yeah, and then ultimately, we were talking about this off air, but UNC was not the only ACC competition that State was having to fend off, and there was some tumultuousness amongst that. Why don't you go into that?
Yeah, so Duke had offered him as well eventually, and it might have been at the same time. Again, we're talking about something that was 15 years ago. I know. Look, at the time, Jake, Duke wasn't considered a big time offer, right? I mean, it was another offer for him to potentially play in the ACC. But when Coach Amato was let go and Tom O'Brien was hired, obviously guys in the recruiting classes, they have to look out for themselves. They don't know if the new staff will want them. You're going to have guys decommit. I remember NC State had multiple kids decommit when Chuck was let go. And that December, I believe he took an official visit to Duke. And again, this is all, stuff we'd heard from behind the scenes. So not totally confirmed. But from what we had gathered, when NC State's new coaching staff found out about it, that he had visited Duke, they were livid and upset. And the rumor is that Tom O'Brien and the coaching staff reached out to Russell while he was on campus for his official visit at Duke, and basically told him, if you don't leave, you don't have a spot at NC State anymore. And essentially put the ball in his court to say, hey, you can go ahead and flip to Duke if you want to, but if you stay there the entire weekend, you're not going to have a spot at NC State. And according to the speculation we heard, Russ left that night, left Duke's campus early, and was fully committed to NC State, wanted to go to NC State. We have to remember he was also a baseball player as well. So he had ties with the Elliott Avent, the NC State baseball staff. So he was viewing himself strictly as a two-sport star, which we know when we do the other feature that regrettably we have to do about him transferring out of NC State, which I still can't believe we're saying that, Jake. But once we do that one, we'll get into the baseball side of it. But for football, yeah, they easily could have lost him to Duke. So you have a player in Russell Wilson who, if North Carolina offers him out of high school, I don't think he ends up at NC State. Now, again, that's just my opinion. I don't think he ends up at NC State. I think he picks North Carolina. They choose to not do so. And then you have a coaching change that fall. And Duke, similar deal. What if he stays on that visit, or what if he likes what he heard from Duke from a pitch standpoint, and he ends up flipping and signing with Duke? Think about all he did for NC State and what he did for Tom O'Brien. And luckily for NC State, he left that visit and firmed up his commitment, and the rest is history.
Yeah, what could go wrong with Tom O'Brien giving Russell Wilson an ultimatum? Obviously it just works out.
Right. Yeah. I trust me, that one's going to be a heated one for me because, I told you before, I've never understood your NC State. When you have a player the caliber of Russell Wilson, I would love to keep him as long as I could keep him. I'm certainly not trying to push him out the door. So, look, it's funny how these things work out because, like I said, you dodged a couple bullets there early on. He comes to NC State, redshirts his first year, and yeah, I think if you're NC State and Tom O'Brien, You kind of have to look at it and see what you have, and they had it, and he won a lot of games at NC State. We know that, but it's just funny looking back on that recruitment and how it almost went in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, and kind of a way to wrap it up and maybe
Mm-hmm.
transition into our talk on the next time. But how quickly, once Russell ended up on campus at NC State, did you start hearing really positive things about, like, holy shit, this guy's good? Like, like, what did it take some time, or was that pretty quick?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I had heard, again, trying to remember back, there was I think, I'm trying to think the exact timeline. I believe Michael Glennon was being recruited around that same off season. So when Russell enrolled, you had Mike kind of being recruited as well. And I think NC State tinkered a little bit with trying Russ at different positions, maybe safety, have him return some kicks, do all those different things. But ultimately, once he got to working out on scout team as a quarterback and the fits he gave NC State's defense, it was clear this guy can play. This guy can play. And I think NC State, even that coaching staff, they didn't know at the time just how good he was. Because, like I said, Tom O'Brien was coming from Boston College. This isn't the prototypical Tom O'Brien recruit,
Mm-mm.
right? Like he wants 6'5", big pocket passer. Think Matt Ryan, think Mike Glennon, that type of arm. So he would have never probably recruited Russell Wilson. So it was a totally different type of player, I think, that he was used to. And so it maybe took them some time to see what they had in him and to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I think once they did, like I said, I think the rest is history. But yeah, there was certainly a buzz about Russ when he was redshirting. Because trust me, I mean, like again, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody on that 2007 class at the quarterback position, but you're rolling out, I think, Daniel Evans and maybe Harrison Beck at the time, if I remember right. Um, I would imagine Russ looked pretty good.
Well, there you have it. That is the story behind Russell Wilson's recruitment and ultimate commitment to NC State. Like we always say, if you're not subscribed to the website, head over there. We have a couple of topics going on the boards where people are throwing out ideas and suggestions for future entries into this series that we're doing. So we're kind of going from that list, and we're picking a few out and going down through them. We're going to be continuing this all throughout the summer. But stick around. We'll have some more of these out soon. I appreciate everyone watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.